Hey Stewart Creek students, this is Miss Breard, and I'm going to talk to you today about numerical and written expressions. At any time, if you want to mute my voice on practice questions to see if you can work them yourselves, you are more than welcome to do so. So, let's get started. First, I want to give you a minute to think about what is the difference between a numerical expression and an equation. Think about that for just a second. If you said that an expression was a number sentence that doesn't have an equal sign, then you were correct. Awesome job. So now that we know what an expression is, let's look at some examples. So we have 5 times 5, 90 times 3 minus 5, and 144 plus 3. These are all expressions. Now let's look at what an equation is. So an equation is like an expression, except it does have an equal sign and both sides must be balanced. So what that means is that whatever is on one side must also be on the other side. So let's look at an example. 45 times 21 equals 945. So when I told you it had to be balanced, I know that 45 times 21 would equal 945. So now that we know about expressions and equations, we want to see some math vocabulary that will help us while we're reading, writing, and interpreting the numerical expressions. First, let's talk about addition vocabulary. There are many synonyms or words that mean the same as the word add. Here are some words that mean to add: plus, sum, more, add together, total. These are some examples of words that tell me when to add. If I wanted to put them in a written expression, I would say something like 16 plus 15, the sum of 16 and 15, 15 more than 16, the total of 15 and 16. And again, these are just a few examples. Next, we're going to talk about subtraction vocabulary. Some words that tell me when to subtract are take away, fewer, difference, minus, and reduced by. Okay, if I wanted to see these as written expressions, I would see things like 34 take away 12, 34 fewer than 51, the difference of 34 and 12, 34 minus 12, and 34 reduced by 12. Our next operation we're going to talk about is multiplication. Some words and phrases that can help us know when we are going to multiply are multiplied by, times, and product. So I could say something like 10 multiplied by 53, 43 times 13, and the product of 45 and 11. These would all mean to multiply. The last operation we're going to look at is division. Some phrases that let me know when to divide are divided by, equal groups, and the quotient of. Some examples that could be used as written expressions are 14 divided by 5 and the quotient of 14 and 5. So now that we have some of the vocabulary out of the way to help us be successful with reading, writing, and interpreting numerical expressions, let's actually practice this. We'll be practicing taking each operation and deciding how we should write them. So let's get started. We're going to look at subtraction first. The first one we are going to look at is 10 minus 2. I know that minus means to subtract, and I also know that 10 is larger than 2. So I will write this numerical expression as 10 minus 2. The next one is the difference between 10 and 8. I know that when I see the word difference, it means to subtract, and I also know that 10 is larger than 8. So I would write this as 10 minus 8. The next one can be a little tricky. 4 subtracted from 8. Obviously, this one is a little easier because it does tell us to subtract, but this one shows 4 first. But I can't say 4 minus 8 because I cannot take away 8 away from 4. So I must write it as 8 minus 4. Our next one is 3 less than 10. Again, we must look at the wording. Less than tells me to subtract. But again, I can't take 10 away from 3, so I must write it as 10 minus 3. And our last subtraction that we will look at is 10 decreased by 4. So I know when I'm decreasing, I'm going down. So I know that I must be subtracting. I know that 10 is larger than 4, so I would write the expression as 10 minus 4. Now, let's look at addition. Our first one is 8 plus 2. I know that plus means to add, and it is telling me that I have 8 and I am adding 2. So I would write the expression as 8 plus 2. Sorry, I don't know why that 8 didn't show up. Okay, our next one is 8 added to 16. This one actually tells me to add, but it says that 8 are being added to 16. So this means that I have 16 and I'm adding 8 to it. So I would write this as 16 plus 8. Okay, our next one, 3 more than 10. I know that if it has more than, I must add. I notice that it is saying more than 10, so I'll start with 10 and then add 3 to it. So I would write it as 10 plus 3. Next we have 5 increased by 5. I know that when I increase something, it goes up or it adds. So I have 5, and I'm increasing or adding 5 to it. So my expression would read 5 plus 5. And then our final addition problem that we will look at is the sum of 3 and 6. I know that the sum means to add and means I'm adding those two numbers. So I would write it as 3 plus 6. Next, let's look at multiplication. Our first one says 5 times 10. I know that the word times means to multiply, so I would simply write 5 times 10. The next one is the product of 3 and 6. I know that when I multiply, I find the product, so I would write the expression as 3 times 6. The next one could give you a little bit of trouble, but it's really not difficult. It says double 4. Okay, so just think about it. What do you do when you double something? I know when I double something, I'm taking that number and I'm actually just multiplying it by 2, and that's going to give me the double of that number. So for instance, we have double 4 here. We would just say 4 times 2. See? Really not that hard. And then finally, we have 5 multiplied by 5. This written expression actually tells me to multiply, so it's pretty simple. All I would have to do is write 5 times 5. See, this really isn't that hard, guys. Last but not least, we are going to look at division. So the first one we have is the quotient of 24 and 6. I know that when I divide, I'm actually finding the quotient. So if I want to find the quotient of 24 and 6, I would write this numerical expression as 24 divided by 6. The next one says half of 16. Well, if I need to find half of something, I'm just simply dividing it by 2. So I would write this numerical expression as 16 divided by 2. Our next one is 20 divided by 5. This one is very straightforward and actually tells you that you're dividing 20 by 5. So that's what we're going to write. We're going to write 20 divided by 5. I don't know why I drew that line right there. I'm sorry. So 20 divided by 5. And then last but not least, we have 6 broken into 3 groups. Okay, so I have 6, and I want to break them into 3 groups to see how many are in each group. Okay, so the way I look at this and how I would write it is what I would say is, okay, I have 6, and I want to divide it or break them into 3 groups. So we would have 6 divided by 3. So now that we've looked at the written expressions for each operation individually, let's see what we would do if we had multiple operations within a written expression. This is where we'll talk about adding parentheses when needed. Okay, so our first one is add 8 and 3 and then multiply by 11. I have to read this very carefully. I see that it tells me to add 8 and 3 and then multiply. So that word right there, then, is very important. So I would first want to write my expression. I know that I'm adding 8 and 3, so I could go ahead and write 8 plus 3. Guys, I have no idea why my computer keeps doing that. Okay, so I have, let's see if I can write it again. 8 plus 3. There we go, that looks better. Okay, so I have 8 plus 3. So then it tells me, then multiply by 11. Okay, so then that means I know I'm multiplying because it tells me right there, multiply by 11. Okay, so the only problem here is we need to know our rules for order of operation, or PEMDAS. If you do not know PEMDAS or the order of operation, I will have another video that you can view just like this one, where I will walk through the rules and the steps and things like that. So what we do know about PEMDAS, though, is real quick, I'll go through it, is we know that we always, when we work out a problem, we do our parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication and or division, then addition or subtraction. Okay, so but this problem tells me add 8 and 3 and then to multiply by 11. So it wants me to add first. So if it wants me to add first and I'm using the rules of PEMDAS, then that means that I would need to have parentheses around the first part of my problem. So that would make our answer in parentheses 8 plus 3 times 11. Our next problem says divide 12 by 6, and then there's that then word again, subtract 1. Okay, again, it's telling me to divide, then subtract. So I have to think about those rules of order of operation, and I know if I can remember those rules that subtraction comes behind division, so I'm not going to need parentheses for this numerical expression. So this is pretty simple. You literally just write it from left to right. I'm dividing 12 by 6, and then I'm subtracting 1. Easy as that. Okay, our next one says subtract 11 from 14, then multiply by 3. Again, we see that word then. Okay, we have to think about our order of operation. We know in order of operation in our rules for PEMDAS is that we know that we always need to do those multiplication before subtraction. Well, this is telling me that I have to do the subtraction before the multiplication. So, again, if you're thinking about PEMDAS, parentheses come before multiplication, okay? So, I would just want to simply write it first, okay? I'm subtracting 11 from 14. Remember, I can't take away 14 from 11, so I have to write that 14 first. I'm subtracting 11 from that 14. Then I'm multiplying by 3. But to make this problem or this numerical expression match my written expression, I have to put parentheses around 14 and 11. So it should look just like that. Okay, our next one is the product of 5 and 4 added to 9. So I know that the product means to, do you remember? Yes, multiply. And knowing my rules for order of operation, I know that multiplication comes before addition. So I won't need parentheses for this one. So I would simply write it from left to right. So I know it says the product of 5 and 4, so that means 5 times 4. And then it says added to 9. So I would simply add that 5 times 4 and add it to 9. So that's what your answer should look like. Okay, our next one says the sum of 5 and 4 multiplied by 9. So I notice again that it tells me to take the sum. So the sum means to, tell me what it is. Yes, addition. And then you're going to multiply it by 9. So I can infer that it wants me to add, then multiply. It doesn't have that word then, but I can definitely infer that, guys. So again, knowing the rules of PEMDAS, I know that addition cannot come before multiplication unless it's in parentheses. So the way I would want to write this problem is 5 times 4, because it says the sum of 5 and 4, multiplied by 9. But then to make the numerical expression match the written expression, I must put parentheses around 5 plus 4. So that's what your answer should look like. So now that we've done written expression and then we write the numerical expression, now I want to give you the numerical expression and you have to write the written expression. Okay, so when I tell you this though, I want you to know that there's not just one perfect correct answer. Okay, when you interpret an answer, there can be multiple correct answers, because think about all of the vocabulary that we talked about a minute ago. So we're going to take this one step at a time. I'm only going to really show you one answer or one that it can be or that it could be, but that doesn't mean that it has to be that. And I'll kind of talk about that more as we go. So our first one we have is 6 plus 3 divided by 3. So I want to interpret what is it asking me to do. So what I see there is I see parentheses come first when I'm solving a problem in order of operation. Okay, so I see that the addition in the parentheses, and then I see divided by 3. So I know that when I'm writing my problem in written expression, I want to make sure that I write it in the order that it should come or how it should be solved. So I know that parentheses comes before division, so I would look at it and I would say, use one of your math addition vocabulary words. So for this one, I want to say maybe, let's say, the sum. So I would want to use the sum, and I would say the sum of 6 and 3. Okay, so when I'm saying the sum of 6 and 3, I am adding. Okay, so then I have a division sign. So I could say divided by 3. So if I wanted to put all of that together it would read the sum of 6 and 3 divided by 3. Pretty simple, right? But like I said, it doesn't have to be that. I could say 3 added to 6, then divided by 3. That's another answer that could be correct. Again, there's no true perfect answer on these. Could be multiple answers. Our next one is 4 times 6 minus 5. I see that there are no parentheses because multiplication goes before subtraction in order of operation. So I know that I would multiply first. So I know that when I multiply, I'm finding the product. So I could say the product of 4 and 6 subtracted by 5. Again, there could be multiple ways to write this. I could say 4 times 6 reduced by 5. So there are multiple ways of writing the written expression. The next one is 7 plus, and then it's got 10 minus 5 in parentheses. Okay, I see that I have 7 plus, and then that parentheses. Again, we got to think about what we know about order of operation. I know that when solving a problem, the parentheses needs to come first. So that's how I need to write it in written expression. You want to put it in written expression how you want to solve it. So I would need to do the 10 minus 5 first because it's in parentheses. So I've subtracted the 10 minus 5, so I could simply say something like subtract 5 from 10. Then it wants me to add the 7. So if I put it all together, it would read something like this. Subtract 5 from 10 and then add 7. Again, there are multiple ways that you could write the written expression. Okay, and the last one we're going to look at is 3 plus 8 in parentheses and then times 5. Remember, we always solve those parentheses first. So in the same way that I write the equation, I want to add that 3 and 8 first. So I could say again, I could use the word sum. So I could say the sum of 3 and 8, then I have to multiply the 5. So if I put it all together, I'd want to say something like the sum of 3 and 8 multiplied by 5. Okay, so that is our last problem that we're going to talk about on this PowerPoint, but I hope that this helps you to make a better understanding of the written and numerical expressions. If you need help with order of operation, I have also created another audio PowerPoint going over those rules of order of operation and how to actually solve the equations. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I miss you guys, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Have a wonderful day.